Well, thank you everyone for joining us today on the topic of surviving OSHA, why your fix isn't enough. We're honored today to have retired OSHA inspector, Marvin Moran, and alongside him, a former global EHS director, safety culture and risk expert who's worked at various organizations like GE, GM, Caterpillar, DuPont, and more. Marvin and Alok will tell you a little bit about themselves, but we wanted to talk about today's topic in particular, given that many OSHA inspections seem to be reactive, and perhaps there may be repeats, perhaps there may be willful, but there's also situations where we find organizations actually want to understand how to get ahead of things, how to prevent repeat citations, repeat issues with OSHA having to come back repeatedly. And no better expert than someone who's actually been in the field to talk about this. So before we allow them to introduce themselves, we just want to quickly mention one thing, which is the information you're hearing today is for informational purposes only, doesn't constitute any legal advice, regulatory guidance, or guarantee of compliance with OSHA or any governing body. The views expressed here are those of Marvin, Alok, and myself, and they're not affiliated with or endorsed by OSHA. So just please be aware of all of that. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Marvin and Alok.
Good morning. I'm a previous Cal OSHA employee as a associate safety inspector, and have worked in both compliance and the research and standards division of Cal OSHA, doing field-wide inspections for equipment and machinery, also accidents, injuries, and initiating what's called construction permits for building sites, also in the industry, or others view them as height permits because they're triggered at 36 feet and above to get a permit to work in such conditions. OSHA considers anything at that height and above as a risk factor, and they want to know that the employer has all the proper programs in place to ensure that those such risks are mitigated.
Great. Thanks, Marvin. Really appreciate you being here. My first name is Alok. Hello, everybody. And I'm your traditional health and safety professional. Been in the industry for about 25 years, construction, manufacturing, utilities, you name it. And really, I've been doing the last 10 years is focusing on safety culture and leadership. Really trying to figure out what it is that people think and what it is they feel. And why is it, after all of our efforts with training, policies, procedures, audits, and all the different things that we do, including PPE, to make sure we protect our employees, we unfortunately still have things happening out in the field. So that's really what I've been focusing on these last 10 years, and why it's become a passion of mine, and why I started my own company called KDD Safety.
All right, I want to start with the topic of what triggers a follow-up visit. So we were having lunch a few weeks ago. Marvin, you were saying to us, anytime you visit a facility, you notice that there are always more issues than even the issues that companies being inspected for. But say a company gets an inspection, it gets a citation, and then it actually wants to properly ensure there isn't a follow-up requirement beyond the standard procedure. What are the things to think about, and to just set some of that framework here, which you can talk about and of course go beyond. If employees, as you talked about as well, make any kind of complaint to OSHA, there is a requirement for you to have to actually at least do a phone call, if not visit that company. Corrective action failing in the field without workers attesting, sister facility citing for a similar hazard, so a parent or corporate entity with different facilities, willful citation or serious incidents, and then what you probably see a lot of, and we'd love to hear about this, but a lot of companies showing you paperwork, but not really getting that attestation from the workforce that they changed stock. So that's a little bit of a framework, But Marvin, tell us what triggers a follow-up visit you see most commonly, and how can companies avoid that?
Hey, before Marvin, you jump in, I just wanted to walk through really quick, 30 seconds of even before OSHA and Marvin even show up on site. What is it that we should be doing to be prepared if this does happen? And I'll just give you a couple of hints, a couple of things that I've done in the past, but and it starts with actually having a written policy and procedure on what to do when OSHA visits. And what does that mean? And some of the guidelines to that is, I would say this should be a policy everybody in your company should be trained on. It can be from a superintendent on a construction site to a foreman to a craft employee to your security guards at a manufacturing site or the person that would answer the door. Because what we want to do is lead that OSHA inspector to a conference room for the opening conference. What we don't want to do is allow them to just get on the site and walk wherever they want to. We want to make sure we understand why it is that they are visiting the site. What is the purpose of it? And also there's going to be numerous people within your organization that you would want at this opening conference call, which could be your plant manager, could be your safety director, could be your HR person. There's various people that are going to want to be involved. And while you are setting up a conference room for the OSHA inspector, also at the same time, you do want to let the site, the field know that OSHA is on site. And if you're doing everything right, hopefully it doesn't make you change anything that you're doing out in the field, but what it does is get people prepared. Also, if there's things, documentations that are needed, such as the OSHA log for the current year, and also, if they are there because of an incident, Marvin would ask for the first incident report. But also within this policy and procedures, though, is I would have basically some sort of cheat sheet, some form that as we're walking with the OSHA inspector, that we would document every single thing that we saw, every person that we talked to. And if you see the OSHA inspector take a picture of it, I would also take a picture of the exact same thing. Because what happens is a week later, 2 weeks later, a couple months later, we tend to forget. We have amnesia. We don't recall exactly why. So documentation is very, very important. And once the site walk is done, you have a post conference and with exactly what it is that Marvin would need, because we may not have some of that paperwork right there at our fingertips. Want to know what it is that we need and when do we need it by, and will you be coming back on site to verify some of these things are done, or can we just take a picture or document it, right? And all that can be done basically via a document request sheet that will be formally handed over to you, request all these things. So just set that framework up to now where I'll turn it over to Marvin.
Thank you. In visiting two types of sites and break it into two major divisions, one is an industrial site or even a business office. The other is construction site. Let's start with construction sites. When OSHA shows up, they're looking around from outside your front gate or however you have your parameters of the job site set up. They're looking around as they arrive there. So having people going by in extensible boom lift machinery or forklifts and things like that, having extension cords or power cords laying around and whatnot, that's all stuff that's wide open and readily visible for the OSHA inspector to see as he's just walking on the site. And a lot of times those end up being a violation before he even gets into the office for your opening session. So that's one of the things to really watch out for, is to ensure that your job site is clean and safe, which I'll start my discussion with the fact that Labor Code 6400 in California requires that all employers provide a safe and healthful work site for their employees. So that's where you start. As to going on a job site, that is a construction site, generally we end up meeting in a trailer that becomes our conference room. And we tell them why we're there. Obviously, if it's for an accident inspection, they know, but complaints they may not know about or may not fully be aware of what the complaint is all about. And OSHA is required to investigate every complaint that comes in to their office. Those complaints can be made anonymously, and they can be made by anybody. A mailman walking down the sidewalk in front of your site trips over a compressor hose where the compressor is sitting at the curb in the street. He can call in a complaint concerning that. Even neighbors in the area out walking their dog or children playing find the sidewalks obstructed and things like that. That can generate a complaint from those sources. And complaints can come obviously from employees on the site. If they see something that they feel is hazardous or unsafe, and there hasn't been anything done about it, they're going to call. And it's why it's wise to follow up on all your hazard inspection and listen to your employees at their tailgate meetings. And if you have a monthly safety meeting as a group meeting that contains subcontractors, that's also an area to pay attention to, because as in the case of a subcontractor, excavation or an elevator install or whatever, and they come on site and they see something, they tell you about it, and they're back the next day and nothing's done about it. That happens a number of times. Guess what? OSHA's going to get the call. And likewise, the inverse is true. If the site management keeps telling a subcontractor to make sure that his tools are all guarded properly and in good condition, safe condition, and they're not, someone can call in an anonymous complaint about them, and we end up out there looking at a specific subcontractor. Sometimes we don't even know what subcontractor it is, and guess what? Everybody gets looked at. So those are the kind of things at the opening you want to make sure that everything is done what is under your control, that you get taken care of. For the opening itself, we're going to discuss what we're there for and what the issues are in the nature of the complaint. Often we're asked, well, where did the complaint come from? That we do not reveal. Anonymous or otherwise, we do not reveal where the complaint came from or obviously who. Anyway, so we go through and explain to them what the complaint was about, and if it's specific to an area on the job site, where we'd like to look to ensure that that complaint isn't causing a problem for your employees or wouldn't cause a problem for your employees. Anyway, so right up front in the opening, that's what we're going to discuss. From there, we're going to look around your job site trailer. We want to see your workers' rules posted and the code of safe practices. All the California state rules, and in some cases, Fed OSHA state rules, Fed OSHA's rules need to be posted on your job site. And with that, also we'll request your Form 300. Form 300, there's two forms that go along with that, 301 and Form 300A. Wouldn't necessarily ask for those depending on what the issue is. But with the Form 300, that is something that has been, let's say, adjudicated where there's a time frame to produce that. That time frame is within 4 hours. That can also apply to other things that we ask for, depending on what they are. Permits, such as your construction or height permit. Is it posted in a trailer? We'd like to see a copy of that. And moving on from there, we'll go down the list. We have a document request list that we like to see. Your code of safe practices, the IIPP. Also, if the complaint involves something that is has to have training for people to initiate or be part of, then we're going to ask for training records as well. So those things are all going to be upfront at the opening. From there, we'll move out to wherever it is that we're looking at that the complaint involves. And it also could involve mobile machinery. Something's not correct on that, such as a seat belt, or perhaps controls are not adequately labeled, or faulty brakes. A lot of sites have rental equipment. It's the employer's job to ensure that that equipment is safe and operates as it's required by the manufacturer. So that's another area to keep your eye on. Even though you may not be responsible for getting it fixed, you're responsible to ensure that it does get fixed. Calling a rental company, come out and do repairs on it, or have the machine replaced, such things as that. Anyway, we're going to look at the job site. And with that, go out to wherever it is that the complaint is about and take a look at that and see what's going on. And with that, if it does involve something that needs correction, we've got a couple of things that we can do. If it's something that can be corrected, such as a guard on a piece of equipment is not functioning properly or is absent, that piece of equipment needs to be taken out of service immediately and or fixed or repaired before it's put back in service. That essentially takes care of the complaint. We see the correction made at that time. Other things like the machinery I was talking about, sometimes that's going to take a day or two to get that off your site and a new piece of machinery out on the site, but it should be tagged out of service with a lockout tag that says do not operate, etc. So you need to ensure that that's done, that that piece of machinery is sidelined. Same goes with tools. If those tools are going to remain on the job site, they need to be tagged out of service as well. In some cases, rendered inoperable.
Well, this is a good opening. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to allow questions toward the back half. But just to kind of keep things progressing, you bringing up some really good points, Marvin. So some of the things as someone who's not as close to the safety and inspection world, things around anyone can call in to OSHA. It's anonymous. It can be your mailman. It can be your employees. And so you really want to avoid having that situation. We think of it in the world as sort of underreporting, meaning if you, as an employer and organization, don't make it easy to have channels that are adequate to collect that information naturally, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that someone may actually go escalate it because they don't find the proper channel, or they don't feel like they're actually being heard with sharing the information that they deem important, but that ultimately the organization is not acting on, and so they have to escalate it to OSHA. So as an organization, better for you to get ahead of these things. And the second component, you talked about looking at training logs, materials, posters, to see what kind of corrective action or proof has occurred. And so if a company is going through those processes, they're trying to do the right thing, there are still situations where repeat citations happen. And we might say they're happening because ultimately those things are not resonating effectively. We're not getting the attestation or the proof from the workforce, which is what we're going to talk about. So we're going to jump forward on a couple slides here just to reiterate what we're talking about. Marvin talking about these points as well, what triggers a follow-up visit, some warning signs of a repeat citation. So a company may think something is closed or resolved or fixed. They may even have some level of proof, but that proof might not actually be sufficient enough because it's not being attested to by the people on the actual floor who are the ones who are closest to the risk and are the ones maybe bringing these up to OSHA. And for those of you, we've had some conversations recently, even with people who sit on the board of directors of some of these organizations. And, they may candidly say off the record, well, my OSHA fines, I don't like them, but from a fine perspective, that they don't really move the needle for me to worry about too much. And this is something we've talked about. One of the interesting things I think you brought up to us is that while the fine, there's a component to that, it's the inability to sometimes even bid on projects or to see that insurance companies, which is something now board level folks usually care about, or what are my insurance premiums and my workers' compensation costs, those tend to be quite correlated with OSHA level activity, inspections, complaints. Is that all pretty accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we want to do something now where we're going to turn the tables a little bit and allow you to kind of see a real life example where Alok, it was in a former kind of EHS type role at different organizations, different safety roles. And Alok, we'd love if you could share a story of a situation where maybe you had an inspection or a complaint, how you dealt with it. And then Marvin, you as a recently retired inspector, to evaluate how that kind of played out, the things that you thought Alok handled well and properly in that company, realizing, Alok being an employee at these organizations, you don't have to, you can be specific or vague as you like, Alok. And then maybe some things you thought or you think could be improved upon and done better. And this was hopefully a way for you all to think about too. And we would have a follow-up for you to be able to kind of have this interactive section too. But look, would you be able to please share a story?
Absolutely. Thanks, Vivek. And I'll share two, Marvin. You tell me how I did. Okay. So the first one is a former employer of mine and on a construction site in central New York. And we had an OSHA inspector visit us on the job site. And that visit went fairly well, or I'll say even really well. And why is that? It's exactly because some of the things that Marvin talked about earlier. When he approached our trailer, housekeeping, at least in that area, was immaculate. Everything looked in order. And when the OSHA inspector walked into our trailer, it was very clean. There's no cords on the ground. It's not dusty. And of course, as the OSHA inspector walks in, first thing he looks at is looks at the exit sign. Do we have one? Is it illuminated? The fire extinguisher, is it tagged? Have we done our monthly inspection? And so, in that short visit, asked for a couple of things documented as to what the scope of the work was, how many employees we had on site, asked for the training records, which I was able to hand to him immediately. And he basically looked outside our job site. Things looked in good standing. There weren't people driving around with fork trucks or booms or anything like that with no seatbelts on, no flagmen, no barricades, things like that. And basically, that was the end of the OSHA visit. Everything looked in order. Everything was at my fingertips when needed. And, at a very early age of my career, what I just kind of assumed is the OSHA inspector is going to go visit a job site where they weren't as prepared as we were. And there was no reason for him to, go out in the field and talk to our employees and visit the job site. So what would you grade me on that, Marvin? What do you think we did on that job site?
You mentioned the fire extinguisher. There's something else that goes along with that too, that OSHA will look at when they step into the job site trailer. And that's the first aid kit. Generally, they're either mounted on the wall, and that first aid kit as required by OSHA to contain certain things. Some of those are dated. The OSHA inspector will often look at that and inspect the retirement dates for certain items that are supposed to be in there. So those are areas that you need to pay attention to avoid those citations for what you think or others might think are minor items.
Yeah, the expiration date is labeled on every single one of those contents of a first aid kit.
Yeah.
And what you should be doing during your weekly inspection of the job site or the manufacturing floor is look at those on a weekly
Right,
basis.
just like the expiration and reinspection date on the fire extinguisher.
Exactly. Exact same thing. So do you think we did all right there?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let me share another story with you where maybe we didn't do as well. And this was actually recently where an OSHA inspector visited one of the job sites, and during their initially getting there on site, call was placed to me as the safety director of the company, and general superintendent were called. I immediately sent somebody from my safety team to go to that job site. Luckily, they were in that area and were able to get to the site, and we were able to hold off and start the opening conference, till they did show up. But during that walk, what we did notice is we did have some citations, and due to the rainy weather here in the Bay Area, the hand wash station was not within the right distance of our bathrooms. There was a lot of rain and things were being moved, but at that time when the OSHA inspector got on site, they were quite a distance apart from each other, hence a citation. Second citation that we also received was we had basically 4 rebars that we did not put rebar caps on. Instead, what we did is we put a mat from a construction stance on there, a good thick rubber, cushion to protect our employees as they were walking by. But what we learned is that mat was not rated to be able to withstand a certain amount of force and weight if somebody was to fall, whereas a traditional rebar cap already has that designation. And the third thing was, again, because of all the rain, we had created some platforms to help our employees get out of the water and the mud to get onto the concrete structure that we had, hence another citation because of which we were able to explain and walk out of that. But the other 2, we were not. And as Vivek had said is, the citations and the fines associated with it, the company I was with, we were okay with that, paying the fine. What we did not want is a citation on our records. And because one of the questions as we're bidding for work at the refineries, at the labs, some of the customers that have high expectations when it comes to safety is, have you received a citation within the last 3 to 5 years? And now because of that job visit, I had to answer yes, which meant a conference call with that company to explain to them what happened and what it is that we had put in place so something like that would not happen. And so you just got a lot more eyeballs looking at you as an organization, and you having to justify why you should be able to at least bid on the job and not just get your company's name thrown out. So how do you think we did on that one?
Well, and forgetting to do certain things can end up causing you citations. It's often wise to have a second set of eyes following you up and checking those things as well. The rebar issue is one that is relatively common because there are some unique rebar placements that don't lend themselves to the commercial protection devices available. And you are allowed to create job site protections for rebar, but they also require record keeping and testing of that record keeping to ensure what you've done as an individual employer or company meets the standard that OSHA sets for protective devices.
We found out the hard way.
Yeah.
But one of the things we did, Vivek, is after those citations, right, we talked about is we need to learn from these events. It's unfortunate that it did happen, but we need to learn from it. So what we did as a company is we immediately that day following the visit is sent a message to all employees within the company of about 400 to 500 employees, sent a message to them as to the OSHA visit, what was found, and what we need to do going forward. And we understand not everybody is going to read those emails. Not everybody's going to be able to comprehend exactly what we're talking about. And so therefore, what we did the following Monday when we did our toolbox talks is had a toolbox talk designated just on those findings from that site visit, and pictures also to show pictures, right, are worth 1,000 words. And then also what our corrective actions were. And then number three, had a team of 5 safety folks within my organization. And when we did site walks and audits and observations, those are things that we looked for on a weekly basis to make sure we had put corrective actions in place and that they stayed in place. And it wasn't just something that came and went. And so what was nice is we really had real data that showed that yes, something did happen, but we learned from it, and something like that's not going to happen within our organization. And we shared it with, all of our 40 sites statewide.
Well, you're bringing up some good points, and I think the thing that you're talking about is you want to do the right thing. And the right thing are the things like the emails, the toolbox talks, the pictures, the corrective actions, the things that you see on the left-hand side of the slide. The objective evidence, as you talk about, a second set of eyes in a way as well. You have these photos, the training logs, you've got invoices, things you can show to OSHA. But yet, as we talked about earlier, and we all know, just doing the minimum doesn't guarantee that we're not going to run into challenges again. So when we actually want to get ahead of things, and we talk about risk proofing in a way to get this workforce attestation, to have this second set of eyes, what are ways we can actually do that? Now, when we talk with some of our customers, they tell us they use things like suggestion boxes, compliance hotlines, the toolbox talks, town halls, focus groups, annual surveys. And while these components have a place, we have a thing called signals, which we'll go to in a moment. We find that in a lot of those instances, there are challenges that maybe you all are aware of too. So for a suggestion box, it feels very one way. You can't close the loop. For an annual survey, it might be more HR oriented on an annual basis. It might not cover the types of topics we're addressing here. A compliance hotline might feel very reactive. It's confidential, but maybe not anonymous. So is there a way to actually get ahead of these things? And so the point we're trying to make on the right-hand side of the slide, and we'll show you in a moment, is that if you have a mechanism where you can, in the flow of work, just take 10 seconds from your people in a language they understand, in a way they enjoy, to actually get them to do 2 things. Proven by that second set of eyes that confirms those changes you're making resonating, and actually help with underreporting. So you don't have external folks or an employee going to OSHA for something that you really could have resolved, so it doesn't affect your ability to bid on larger revenue type opportunities. And so the way that might work is that you could imagine a tablet set up somewhere in your facility near a time clock or break room or restroom. And this could be the question on the screen. So we were talking about a machine guard, and you could have a very simple question. Is the machine guard on press 3 still in place and safe to use now? And so you've made that fix, and you now want to get that attestation from the workforce. And it does 2 things. One is it's something you can show to your boss and say, boss, look, I've actually made the change and it's resonating. And here's the proof. And it's something you can also show to OSHA to say, we're going beyond the minimum standard of, say, setting up a poster and doing the training. We're getting proof that our workforce actually sees that change, validates it, and ideally makes them feel safer about the workplace. So not only improving our safety standards, but also improving our operational standards, hopefully lowering turnover, decreasing absenteeism, and all the other components. We call these things signals. And really, they're aligned with other components as well. So sometimes we may assume silence or a drop in reporting means things are going well. But as we talked about on our Frontline Advantage podcast, Alok, just because you see a decline in reporting doesn't mean things are going well. In fact, you actually want to see quite a bit of reporting. You want to get this information so it doesn't have to escalate to OSHA. And so when we say something here like new shortcuts appearing in high-risk tasks, what we mean is if you have a question on your tablet saying, have you skipped a step today? If your boss is asking you that question and you're trying to meet a production goal and you have your standard operating procedures, your employees might not want to actually tell you I skipped a step to meet your production goal. But if they don't tell you that, what it may lead to is a recall on the quality side. It could lead to a safety incident that makes the news. It could lead to OSHA coming in, which they would prefer to not have to come in repeatedly. They would prefer you get ahead of these things. You talked about first aid kits, and you can see first aid cases or close calls, the actual things that may be indicative of types of challenges that may be coming up. And then frontline questions unanswered or ignored. And it's super important that you capture that voice. I will let you both react to sort of some of these topics, but I think it really hits home on the types of things we're hoping to help solve that you both are bringing up.
Well, I can jump in first, and as you're talking, Vivek, I'm thinking about the real data that I just talked about from the safety audits on the floor on the job site, right? And this is another channel that allows us to prove to not only ourselves, our leadership, that things are working or are not working, and we need to continue to do better. And as you were talking, it reminded me of one of the manufacturing floors where I visited, where they had a lot of issues with hearing protection. And it was during the holiday season. I came to the site to do an audit. I remember the supervisor of the floor being very, very excited about all the corrective actions that they had put in to resolve these issues. So they put signs all over the floor about hearing protection required. It was 100%, because as soon as you walked in through the door, there was a lot of different machinery that was, creating noises. So good. And in there, when you clocked in, there was incidents talking about hearing protection that they've had also to raise the attentiveness. Great. Number 3, what they did is their morning sheet before they started work, they basically had to sign off as to what the scope of the work was and what some of the safety things that they should be focused on. And they had hearing protection required. He actually had it highlighted, and it within the safety sheet, it said it numerous times. So the leadership's their heart's in the right place. They're doing all the right things that they think they should be doing to help improve their employees on the floor wearing hearing protection. And what I told them is, I said, perfect. Let's go walk out on the job site, on the manufacturing floor, and let's see how many employees are actually wearing their hearing protection. And, and I'll just say is based on the first 10 employees we saw, 4 employees out of the 10 still were not wearing hearing protection. And I remember him being very, very disappointed in that. And I said, listen, that's good. Let's accept it for what it is. 60% of our employees are wearing hearing protection. After all the efforts that we've made, let's figure out what else we need to do to raise that number from 60% to 7%. So don't get discouraged. Everything you guys did is the right thing to do. It's just we may need to do more. And I'll turn it over to you, Marvin.
Well, one of the things that there's a couple of items I'll discuss here, but one of the things in mentioning fellow employees is to create a culture amongst the employees where one employee, if he sees one of his partners out there doing something that's unsafe or not wearing the right safety equipment or possessing the right safety clothes, is just to mention it to him. Hey, don't you think you should be wearing that? Or donning that particular protective item. That's important in the employee culture, is that look out for each other as well, just not depend on management. Because management's not on site exactly where the employees are 100% of the time. You got one or two managers and, maybe dozens of employees. You can't be everywhere at once, but employee self-policing works. And I've seen it in action myself on jobs that I've been involved in over the years. Another thing, when you're mentioning guards and safety gear, I had made a visit to a industrial site that had a lot of machinery, fabricated products, designed and fabricated products. One of the things I thought was very useful in their facility is that they had at each machine station a pictorial view of what the employee needed to wear, just not, or have available, just not a notice like a placard with language on it saying you must wear safety glasses, gloves, or whatever, hard toe shoes, etc. But also with that, there was a picture there with the employee standing with a bump cap on, safety glasses, and gloves, and long sleeve shirt. So that, and it just wasn't for that machine, it was for all the machines on their facility. They actually had pictorial views of what things should look like when they approach that area and work at that machine. Because in that particular plant, the employees worked at several different processes. So it's easy to forget from one process to the next that they may need an extra layer of safety equipment. So that helps too in such situations like that, where you need reminders.
I love that you're talking about safety culture, Marvin. And, one of the questions on a survey that I tend to focus on, and it's probably the most important question to me, is everybody speaks up when they see somebody doing something unsafe. And if you can get a 10 out of 10 on that question, everything else will fall in place because you have the right culture. And what is culture is what our employees are doing out in the field when the boss isn't watching. When us are there and we're doing a safety walk, everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing because they might know we're coming, they know who we are. But what I really want to know is when there's nobody there, what is it that they're doing? That's really my gauge of a safety culture, is what is it our employees are doing when the boss is not around, and right? And where does that come from? That's from attitudes, behaviors, previous employers, leadership. All those things make up the safety culture. And that's why I love that question, as to everybody speaks up when they see somebody doing something unsafe. And if you can get a 10 out of 10, your safety culture is heading in the right direction. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and that's exactly the type of thing on the underreporting side. We try to make it easy and safe for people to do. So there are channels that exist, and someone may say, you may believe, we have sufficient channels. We have the ability to capture all this information. Why would we need an anonymous mechanism set up to actually be able to answer this question? And the proof is quite simple, which is that in less than 30 days, you can take the number of signals. Here you see a simple yes, no, not sure. But assuming someone presses the yes button, there's a follow-up screen where they can actually document whatever they've seen. And our guarantee is that within the first 30 days, we guarantee we will capture more relevant signals related to underreporting, like you see here, than any other channel that you have presently available today. That compliance hotline, the town hall or focus group, one-on-ones, an employee app, an internet portal, you name it. We are that confident, and we've seen the results repeatedly from some of the largest enterprises in the world to even small and medium-sized businesses. And the reason is that if you make it safe, if you make it fun, if you make it voluntary, if you make it in the flow of work, if you don't make it take much time, people are really going to be willing to tell you things they might not have otherwise told you. And if they do that, that will ultimately benefit your organization in the ways we described throughout the session earlier. We're coming up on time, So you're welcome to follow up directly with us if you're interested in how we may be helpful in any fashion, or if you even want to talk with Marvin or Alok. But we want to set aside just some time. If you have any questions, you have a recently retired OSHA inspector here. And so there's an opportunity to be able to ask anything you'd want to ask that you might not have an easy opportunity to do so otherwise, or just ask anything in general to Alok, Marvin, or myself. So thank you for sitting through most of this presentation, and we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts and answer any questions.
Vivek, while they're thinking about a question to ask, I actually had a question for Marvin. So when we're talking about the opening conference, when OSHA does show up on site, and obviously we want to keep you in the room while we are doing things, getting the right people in the room, letting the floor know that OSHA is on site and what the purpose of the visit is. We've always kind of discussed is how long before you realize we're just stalling you and trying to take care of the issue out in the field. When do you start to get impatient? Is there a number, or is that just a sense?
Well, there's a what I call a vague number that can be, stretched out or shortened up depending on the circumstances. But one of the things that we do is we'll look at the records and see if that company's had any recent citations and what the nature of them were. Okay. And a lot of companies have citations in our record period. I mean, that's not unusual at all. Others have. So depending on what their record looks like and what the nature of their problems were, that can affect how we view someone talking at us at a lengthy time or other issues. But generally, it takes us a few minutes to go through the document request list, and a lot of documents we don't expect to have in hand immediately. We'll sign off on a sheet that we give the employer that shows them what documents or what further documents in the same realm, like training records. Maybe they only have last month's training records. And we say, well, we'd like to see a year's training records. And we'll give an amount of time, maybe 4 days or a week or whatever. But we'll spell that out and we'll give the employer a sheet that says exactly what we want and the date that we'd like to have it. And oftentimes, depending on what it is, that can be sent to us. But we'll be back knocking on your door if it doesn't show up. So that's one thing right there. Now, as to the time frame, again, depending on while we're there, the time frame, we don't like to see it go beyond our opening and the document requests that we have, which depending on the length of, again, what's happened and the length of the document list we have, we're going to spend 15, 20 minutes or slightly more. We don't like to be held up in the office longer than that. I'll reference the log 300. OSHA gives the employer 4 hours, up to 4 hours to bring us that. We're not going to sit there and wait 4 hours for it, obviously. But we may be on the site for a whole day, depending on what we're looking for and what we're looking at. So those things, as we mentioned, those right up front. The other records that will allude to that could be a 4-hour time frame, inspection records. The facility has cranes that are greater than 3 tons rated capacity. Those have to have a state inspection. We could often ask for those, or if a crane was used handling material, that a person got, let's say, his hand pinched or something like that, and we're going to ask for those records up front. And the same with machinery in the facility. Oftentimes, manufacturing facilities have air compressors. Air compressors have air receivers. The receivers are required to have a permit issued by the state, and the permits are valid for 5 years. But the other thing is they need to be posted at or near the air receiver. Oftentimes, employers will have a piece of laminated plastic with a copy of that permit hanging right on the piping at the receiver. Those are the things we like to see, and it'll reference that the original permit is in the file in the office.
So you're not going to give me a number, are you?
Yeah.
You're not going to give me a number, is what I'm hearing you think. You're not going to say 30 minutes, 1 hour, huh?
No, it's not a fixed
Not a
thing,
fixed number.
but
Okay, that's fair.
generally the length of what we request in the opening for records and stuff, a little bit of time it takes to produce those is the maximum amount of time we want to spend sitting around.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
That's fair.
On very large, now there's another issue here too. Let's say we're on a return visit. Okay. And we need to speak to certain employees who were involved in the initial visit. Okay. We'll give you time to round that employee up, and if, you know, they want to go to the washroom and clean up and stuff. We'll sit and wait for that. The employee also has the opportunity to have his union representation there if he so desires, and if it's a union work site. A lot of sites are multi-union, especially construction sites. So that can extend the time out too. I mean, 30 minutes wouldn't be unusual time to take to find that employee on the 30th floor and get him down,
Sure.
etc.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. We've got about 5 minutes. Does anyone have anything they want to ask on air? Or you're welcome to also ping us afterwards, but if anyone has anything for the group. Be giving out rewards for questions.
That would help.
We hope this has been helpful, and we appreciate you staying on. You have our contact information. We'll definitely be following up with you. We'll be sharing this as well, but we hope this has been an educational opportunity to hear directly. I want to thank you, Marvin, for really setting aside time to share with all of us and learnings, and Alok, you know, just really appreciate everything you've been able to do to bring this all together. So yeah, thank you everyone, and we look forward to following up with you.
Thanks.
Like the opportunity to be able to do this, anything to improve safety and make a more healthful and safe workplace, I'm all for, and I always like to be part of.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.